to welcome Andrew Greenway, who's a Project Development Champion for Andy's Man Club, to our Wellbeing Ambassador session here. So Andrew will share with us how the group came about and the absolutely amazing work that Andy's Man Club are doing to challenge the stigma surrounding men's mental health, and show just how important it is for men to have a safe space to speak openly about their troubles and, most importantly, save lives. So the session's going to last around 40 to 45 minutes. It is being recorded so that we can share it with people who are being unable to attend. So we can share the message with wellbeing ambassadors and more widely with our teams and families and colleagues. So we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Andrew.
Lovely. Thank you. I shall just start sharing my screen with you guys and we'll make a start. Move that little white box out of the way. So, thank you so much for the opportunity to come and talk to you this morning about Andy's Man Club. I'm certain that some of you may be aware of what Andy's Man Club does, might have seen a little bit of us on social media and have a little bit of awareness about some of the work that we do. But I'm also certain there's likely to be people here who don't know who we are, don't know what we do, and don't know why we do it. Now, our why, as far as Andy's Man Club, is absolutely central to absolutely everything that we do. So to help us highlight why we exist, I'd like to start by showing you a quick video, please.
Annabelle, right, which one there? Come here. Ow.
So about 8:30 on Tuesday, 5th of April, I got a knock on the door by a policeman who just more or less said that they'd found my son dead. It was like somebody had just stuck their hand in and literally ripped the heart out of me. It just come out, I just says, our Andrew's dead. I have a lot of conversations with Andrew. And I don't know if they're in my head or dreams, but I meet him on the woods. Where is he thinking about it? And I says, well, you give me 5 reasons why you should. So I'll give you 1,000 why you shouldn't. For every reason they give me to do it, I could tell him why not to and where he got it wrong. And at the end of it, I just say, I'm going home now. But you've got to make this decision. Just think about what I've said. And in my dream, he always comes home. And I would just say, just talk to somebody. He started playing football when he was 5 and he played for the same team. Right up to 13, 14.
Well, me and Andy couldn't drink, so when we used to go out, we always used to be with him a bit proper lightweights. We'd have like get on shots or if you got Acker and you get 75p drinks or anything like that. We'd always end up same time going outside, throwing up in the alleyway and then going back in and carrying on. We used to do it all the time. We still laugh about it now, do you know what I mean? But like, funny, good lad, quality. Just a proper lad, really. It's like any other lad, do you know what I mean? Like, just a proper lad's lad.
We're at the woods where Andy committed suicide. It's quite a different place with the trees, and it's quite special in that sense. How the trees are all different to your average trees, and this is where Andy chose to go. And it's a difficult place to be. Knowing that it's the last place that he was alive, that's really difficult. This is the hard thing, and something I've racked my brain around doing a lot within mental health in the past, and there were definitely no signs. We were planning to do things. He had stuff planned, he had stuff that we were ready to go and do, and on the Monday night, when he killed himself, potentially one chat or one discussion with anyone, just to see what was going on, just to let him know that he was all going to be okay.
So that's our why. As you could see there, Andy was a 23-year-old lad like so many others, enjoyed his weekends with his mates, playing football, And then one day, with no sign, signal, or warning, Andy took his own life. Now, I'm sure all of you guys will be more than aware of this, but Andy's not on his own. There's over 4,500 men take their own lives every year. When you boil that down, that's 12 men a day, one man every 2 hours. When you read that suicide is the biggest killer of men under 50, it shows the size of the problem that we're dealing with. What really intensifies this problem for me personally is that this isn't talked about. You know, we hear an awful lot about the risk factors for men. We don't hear too much about this. It's not in the newspapers every day. It's not on the TV news every single day about some of the things that we hear that are risks to young men. Because there's still a stigma attached. There's still a stigma attached to talking about suicide as a subject matter on its own, let alone the things that lead up to it. That's one of the things that Andy's Man Club hopes to change. So Luke that you saw in the video there is Andy's brother-in-law. Being Andy's brother-in-law, Luke took a lot of the responsibility for the things that needed to happen after Andy had died upon himself. So, for example, Luke went and collected Andy's car from where he'd left it. Luke was breaking news of Andy's death to members of the family and basically just watching them crumble in front of him. Now, Luke was of the opinion that this didn't need to happen. It was an avoidable situation. He thought that if Andy had had somewhere to go to be able to talk freely and openly about his issues in a non-judgmental and safe environment, it's likely he'd still be here. The idea was that he'd get into a room full of people that have been in similar, if not the same situations, and they'd say to him that, you know, taking a permanent step to solve a temporary situation isn't the way forward. You know, I've been in that situation. I got through it and you can too. So he decided he was going to start a coffee club for men. Now that sounds like a massive, you know, massively simple solution to a massively complex issue. As we all know, though, the normal, you know, the simple solutions are normally most effective. Let's be honest as well, we're British, so there's nothing we can't solve by putting the kettle on. He decided he was going to start a coffee club. The idea behind the coffee club was that men would go along, grab a brew, and talk about their issues and talk about what was happening and not be judged, not worried about, you know, whether they were being called a weakness, a burden, or an embarrassment, or whether or not they were, you know, we'd just strip all that away. Let the guys sit, talk, get into a room and decide that actually, do you know what, this talking's okay, it works. Now, this happened in Halifax, as I'm sure some of you guessed when the ACCA got mentioned in that video. As most of you'll know, Halifax is a very staunch northern town, full of the sort of fellas that internalise their problems and their feelings a lot of the time. When you've read there that 9 men showed up to the very first ever Andy's Man Club, in a place like Halifax, it showed that there was a clear need for Andy's Man Club to exist. A few weeks after the start of the session, Luke had seen things like the Ice Bucket Challenge and the Press Up Challenge go through social media and thought that as bad as a reputation as social media has for the effects it can have on people's mental state, when used for something like this, it could be quite a positive and powerful tool. Now, the idea behind the campaign was to use the very selfie that you can see there, telling guys that it's okay to talk. You don't have to worry about those stigmas. You're certainly not a weakness. You're certainly not a burden. You're certainly not an embarrassment. Very much the idea that we'd rather listen to you talk about your problems for an hour than to sit and listen to your eulogy for 20 minutes. Now, the idea behind the campaign was that people would take their own selfie, attach a screenshot of the statistics and tag 5 friends, and then they'd share and tag 5 friends, and so on and so on. A couple of interesting things about that. The first one being that as Luke took that picture, he was sat next to his Mrs. Lisa, and he says, "Oh, what do you think? Do you think it's a good idea?" Lisa said, "Yeah, I think it's a good idea, but I don't think you should be on the selfie just because you're a right ugly get." Now, I happen to disagree with Lisa. I'm not just saying that because Luke's my boss. I'm saying it because I also think he's dashingly handsome. But I'm also saying it because I know how many Instagram filters he put on that picture to make it fit to be in the public domain. If any of you ever meet Luke, he'll talk you through which selfies are on that picture, and not just that, the angle to hold your camera at so you don't get your double chin in and everything. The other interesting thing about that is that it's now been recognised as the biggest mental health campaign on the planet. Over 100 million people took part in that and are still taking part in that campaign to this day. We've had Hollywood sports stars, etc., etc. The other interesting part is that 24 hours after that picture going live, such are the stigmas that exist and such the awkwardness and uncomfortable for people talking about suicide as a subject matter, not one person had got involved. Now, when you look back, especially this year, at just some of the absolute nonsense that people are quite comfortable to share on social media, shows that, again, this campaign needed to happen. The fact that people felt awkward or uncomfortable talking about this sort of thing means that we need to talk about it more often. Luke thought to himself, well, Andy's Man Club's a solutions-based organisation. I'm not going to let this stand in my way. Thought, I'm going to text my dad. My dad's a positive male role model in my life. If one person gets involved, it'll make me feel like I've made a bit of a difference. Luke was also a professional rugby league player at the time. as a result of that. Some of his teammates started to get involved, and it started to snowball from there. By the end of the first week, we'd had a pretty spectacular result of people getting involved. Ricky Gervais got involved with Andy's Man Club and our It's Okay to Talk campaign. Any of you that follow Ricky Gervais on his social media will notice that he normally only ever tweets about pulling funny faces in the bath or his cats. So the fact that he shared an It's Okay to Talk selfie for us was enormous. I think it's then great how he's gone on to normalise that conversation around suicide as well with the series Afterlife. To bring that subject matter into the living rooms of people on a daily basis in such a challenging way is such a good way of broaching those stigmas, in my opinion. Now, I'm not claiming that Andy's Man Club's had anything to do with Afterlife, by the way. I'd love to be able to, but I can't. Just think it's brilliant that, you know, those sort of things are being talked about. And I'm sure anybody that's seen the series will agree. The way that it's done, in that 1 minute it's laugh out loud funny, the next minute it's absolutely crying your heart out. It's such a powerful series. The world of sport have been massively supportive for us as well. You know, as you can see there, we've got some pretty masculine men. You know, let's be quite honest, boxers punch each other in the face all day for fun. They are supposed to be the epitome of masculinity. And here they are, not worried about that judgment, not worried about what people are saying to them, and helping us a huge amount by sharing our message. That goes a long, long way to helping us to get out to those people that we know really need our sessions. The world of sport as a whole have been massively supportive of us. As you can see there are, you know, football teams wearing our logos, there's football teams warming up in our T-shirts, advertising boards around the pitch, various different things happening there. Again, that's huge in that it allows us to really reach out to a demographic of men that we know would benefit from Andy's Man Club and what it is that we do. As helpful as this is for what it is that we do, these ultimately are the people that we hope that benefit. Now, we want these guys to benefit in a number of ways. The first way being that we hope that, you know, Andy's Man Club's quite unique in what we set about to achieve. We don't want to have to exist. We want people to feel comfortable talking to friends, family, colleagues, partner, best mate, boyfriend, whoever it might be, about what's going on inside. So they don't necessarily feel the need to come along to something like Andy's Man Club. We really do want to challenge those stigmas to that sort of degree. Our hope is that by the time these guys are old enough that we're a little bit further down the line and something like Andy's Man Club is less and less needed. Now, we also hope that these guys benefit from the adults in their life, finding out about Andy's Man Club, coming along, benefiting their situation so that you aren't affected by the pain left behind by suicide. Unfortunately, the gentleman right in the middle of your screen there wearing the denim jacket hasn't been that fortunate. That's Alfie. That's Luke's little boy, Andy's nephew. Luke says that one of the major reasons behind Andy's Man Club existing is because when they had to break the news to Alfie that his uncle Andy had died, the screech that let out put the windows through. The pain left behind by suicide is like nothing else. If we can reach out to more and more guys that are feeling the way that Andy felt, ultimately we hope to have less and less guys in the situation that Alfie's in, less and less brother-in-laws in the situation that Luke's in, and less mothers in the situation that Elaine's in. Speaking of Elaine and Luke, we're going to hear a little bit from them now, talking about the journey that Andy's Man Club's been on over the last 5 years.
Starting a group or a club called Andy's Man Club, and the reason I came up with it because I've been passionate about mental health for a long time. 3 months ago, my brother-in-law died by suicide, and I want to do something where I could personally contribute and make a group and go and help other men, come up with a plan where guys can come together and talk. And if it ends up being like tonight's the first night, so you know I'm quite nervous about tonight and who turns up, but the outreach that I've received has been unbelievable, and it's so rewarding now looking at what we've done and why we've set it up along with Andy's mum. We've got a purpose behind it, which is mental health and Andy, and that his name can live on and create a legacy and helping. And if we can move this to Bradford and Leeds and so on and other people get involved and they want to set up an Andy's Man Club in Nottingham or up in Scotland, that'd be ideal.
Okay, guys, are we ready? Up 3, 1, 2, 3. It's okay to talk.
Andy's Man Club.
Andy's Man Club. Andy's Man Club.
Andy's Man Club.
We're here at Albert Prom. Significant for 2 reasons for me. One, we're just above where Andy died by suicide. And 2, were just above the Tower House, where I approached you 5 years ago and said, can we start Andy Roberts Coffee Club, which no one will have heard of because you accepted the idea but declined the name. And then we both went away, didn't we? And you'd thought of Andy's an acronym, and I'd thought of this thing, Man Club, and together we created the beast that is now well known as Andy's Man Club. How did you feel heading there that first night?
Excited, actually. I remember going to Morrison's to buy tea, coffee and sugar. And like you said to me, there'll only be us turn up, there won't be anyone there. And I said, I can put up with you for an hour. And I were actually amazed that 9 guys walked through the door.
And all opened up.
And accepted me being there.
Yeah.
So what's your biggest few highlights been over the last 5 years?
The overall journey, I won't change anything from putting that first post out to doing that Sky Sports interview, to having no idea how many guys would come, to 9 guys turning up, to then 15 guys turning up. It just completely exploded. To the next minute being down doing stuff with Samaritans, Professor Green, Prince Charles, Prince Harry, letters off Theresa May, the Queen's Award, Uni Lad Bible, Shortlist, like the list goes on.
Just took over, didn't it?
Yeah, there was nothing else.
No, there wasn't. I breathed, slept, ate, drank, and was naked. Everyone that goes to their own group says it's a brotherhood that they've got. It's like having a second family.
I know a lot of men that have struggled generally, especially in the UK, I think, and not enough men talk about the problems.
The first step towards helping myself was joining Andy's Man Club. The only time I first spoke about my problems was when I first went to Andy's Man Club.
I first sought help through Andy's Man Club.
It's saved my life, really.
One of the things that I still find that's been the most powerful thing is that very first night we all got together for Lad Bible Children. We hired Shay, did it all up with balloons and everything, and we had no idea at that stage whether it was going to be just me and you again, or our families were going to go. And there were 300 to 400 people turned up, and that is the first time I realised how much work we were doing to help the families. There were so many families there that had lost people. 2 different moms came up to me. It's got me again. 2 different moms came up to me and said, it's the first time I've ever been able to talk about it, because suicide is something you just never talk about, and if somebody asks how did your son die, but it is very difficult to say they died of suicide. And they were both in tears, and they just said it's the first time ever we've been able to talk. And it weren't until then that I realised what a massive impact we were having on the families.
So, 5-year-old today, happy birthday, Andy's Man Club. So that first night, we've walked in, 9 men have turned up, one of which, Oliver Vicks. What a journey that man's had.
And they just...
I had nowhere to go, nobody to talk to. I found myself in the pub most nights, just for some company, to go somewhere and be around other people. I soon realised that that wasn't a very productive way of dealing with my problems. It was about that time that I found Andy's Man Club. I actually attended the very first ever session of Andy's Man Club. From there, just that first night, opening up, talking to people about my problems, it really helps put things in perspective, knowing that it wasn't just me that was going through these things, but also it's okay to talk and it's okay to get things off your chest. After that first session, I felt like I'd had 12 cans of Red Bull. I honestly felt like I could have flown home that night.
And I knew then that was a feeling that I wanted to share with as many men as possible, provide this platform to as many men as possible. So we're here now today, opening our 50th club in Pontefract. And we set out with a goal 5 years ago of having 10 clubs in 5 years. So to have 50 clubs in 5 years is absolutely unreal.
The fact that you were the first guy, or one of the first guys to walk through the door, one of the first guys to speak, to then go on to be a facilitator of the biggest group at the time of Andy's Man Club in Halifax.
Well, he was really first facilitator.
First, yeah, and then became one of our Project Home champions, and now heading up, starting new groups. He's just put the pin on the board for the 50th group over there in Pontefract, and to celebrate, he jumped out of a plane. So when people talk about that one man, it's not just a guy walked through a door and he's talked about his problems. Here's a guy who's walked through a door, talked about his problems, got himself back into his job, started seeing his son again, got his life right back on track, and now works for us, and he's jumping out of a plane celebrating up in there.
That's how Andy's Man Club grows, because once people are in better positions, they don't walk away, they want to give something back and know the next man that's going to walk through that door.
Yeah. But the biggest part for me that's made this journey so nice is the people. That's what's so special about Andy's Man Club. The people, and the fact we're a registered charity now. We have 8 amazing trustees, 7 fantastic staff, over 250 plus heroes, facilitators who open those doors every single Monday night to give guys that safe place to go and talk. To the thousands, the army of volunteers out there on the streets, raising awareness, backing us, supporting us, loving us, liking, sharing, commenting, every single thing we do. Because without the people at AMC is nothing. And they are the biggest asset that we've got. And we're indebted to each and every person that has ever supported us and continues to do so. If I could send any message out, it would be that other men or other people could set up a club, call it whatever you want. Just get men talking and making it feel that it's okay. Get rid of this stigmatism that it's a problem, and let's squash it together. And hopefully, there could be some lives saved for it.
So that's a little bit more of an insight into where we've come from over the last 5 years and the work that we've been doing. Just to note off the back of Ollie's story that was told there, that's the same for all of our facilitators throughout our clubs. Our facilitators are run, our sessions are run by facilitators who've taken that step through the door initially as a group user. For guys that are attending, to know that the people that are welcoming them in on the door are people that have felt very similar things to them, I think is a massive strength of this organisation. To know that those people have felt those dark thoughts, felt those, anxieties about going along to something like Andy's Man Club is just a massive strength of the organisation. So, what is Andy's Man Club? Well, we currently have 64 clubs across England, Scotland and Wales. We have a full list of those on our website, but the closest ones to us, obviously, with starting in Halifax, we do have quite a number across Kirklees and Calderdale. We have 2 in Halifax. We've got Brighouse, Hebden Bridge, a couple in Huddersfield, Ainley Top. So we are quite well furnished for Andy's Man Clubs in and around this area. Those sessions are open to any man aged 18 or over. As you heard Luke say back in the first video now, that you don't have to have had suicidal thoughts. You don't have to have had a mental health condition. You might just be going through a particular storm in life. In our experience, there's 3 types of guy in the world. There's guys that are currently going through a storm, guys that have got a storm brewing on the horizon, and guys that are just coming out the other side of a storm. All 3 of those types of guys would benefit from knowing that Andy's Man Club exists, from coming along, talking about their situation. On top of that, the guys that are in that session would benefit from listening to them talk about it, to know how they're dealing with it, to get their own strategies for dealing with the situations that they're in as well. The sessions happen every Monday night, 7 p.m, except bank holidays, and work exactly the same way. So if you attend one of our clubs up in Scotland or one of our clubs down in Devon, those sessions run in exactly the same way. We liken it a little bit to McDonald's in that, you walk into a McDonald's, you know what you can order, you know what you're going to get. And it's exactly the same with an Andy's Man Club. The other unique way in how we work is that there's no referral, no registration, no signing in, no cost, no obligation to speak either. Guys can walk through the door, grab a brew and sit and talk as much or as little as they feel comfortable to do so. There's an example of a guy that always jumps to mind when I talk about this, and it's one of the guys that runs our group up in Perth in Scotland. The first 3 times he walked through the doors of an Andy's Man Club, he had his headphones on. Such was his anxiety, he couldn't take his headphones off. They were there as his little safety blanket, if you like. The facilitators, after his sort of second or third time of attending, just said, well, take them off and listen to how we work. So if you do choose to speak, you know how the session works and things like that. So after that third session, he listened to the facilitator speak about how the session works. The fourth week that he came along, he took his headphones off for sort of 20 minutes within the session and listened. The session after that, he came in, took his headphones off and listened for a full week. And then the week after that, opened up, shared, talked about his issues, confided in the club that 6 weeks previously, he'd found himself stood on a bridge and was spoken down from that bridge by a gentleman. And the support that he'd received as far as Andy's Man Club was concerned, I think he'd only been to one session at that time. The support that he got from Andy's Man Club had really helped him through the situation that he was in. And as a result, he's now running our Perth club up in Scotland. Again, that just shows that power of talking, from being able to open up, not be rushed, not be forced into speaking, not be told that, some of the services that are available, obviously, if you turn up one week and don't speak, you don't get the opportunity to attend again. The fact that he was able to come through that door, speaking his own way, is massive. As a nice little bookmark to that story as well, you probably saw in that video there, the national tour that we went on a few years ago. While Nicole was on that tour, he stood up on a park bench in Perth next to our tour bus, and he could actually see the bridge that he'd been stood on. And purely by chance, when he'd finished speaking, a gentleman approached him from out in the audience and just happened to say, "Do you recognise me?" And he said, "No, I'm afraid I don't. I'm really, really sorry." He says, "Well, I'm the guy that taught you down off that bridge." And for him to have that as a bookmark to that story, again, it's just massive. He was able to meet Nicole's mum, and a really emotional moment that just happened purely by chance. But the sort of thing that happens quite regularly as far as Andy's Man Club are concerned as well. We now have over 1,000 menus in our groups. We had almost 1,070 guys using our groups across the country last night. Again, when you rewind 5 years and see that we had 9 guys coming through the door, that's a huge, huge jump. It really does show that need for something like Andy's Man Club to exist, for us to do what we're doing, because those guys are coming through the door. But what's another huge jump is up to those 4,500 guys that are still taking that step every single year. We will always continue to take opportunities like this to come and speak about what it is that we do. And our hope is that you guys will talk about what you've heard today, because in our experience, there's somebody in everybody's life that will benefit from knowing what it is that Andy's Man Club does. We also have an online platform. Obviously, this was developed during the pandemic when the whole world was forced to go online. We were left with very little option. We only ever missed 1 week of sessions due to the pandemic. We were able to think really quickly on our feet and develop that online platform. We found that that's been very beneficial in a number of ways. One of those ways is that guys don't have to be tied by geography anymore to come along to one of our sessions. If they're not close by to one of our sessions, then they can obviously jump online and benefit in that way. It also means that, obviously COVID is still a thing, unfortunately. If guys are having to isolate, they can still jump on. It also means as well that for some guys, that step to walk through the door is such a one that, that they need a little bit of a safety blanket, and to be able to attend a session from the comfort of their own home initially is a massive benefit to them. We do not publish those links on any sort of platform other than if guys send us an email. Unfortunately, that 1 week that we missed, we presented a session on Facebook, and it showed to us that unfortunately trolls still exist. So all we ask is that guys drop us an email into info@andysmanclub.co.uk, and we can share with them the details of those messages, of those sessions. So why is it me talking to you about Andy's Man Club today? I first walked through the doors of Andy's Man Club as a group user just over 4.5 years ago. I'd been in a situation the previous Christmas where I was being that staunch northern fella, chin up, chest out, internalise my problems and my feelings and don't talk about them. Partly because I think that's what society had taught me that I needed to do. That's how a man deals with his issues. And, I think I'd very much bought into that. It took my brother to recognise a bit of a change in me. He got hold of me, saw that I had my head buried into the sand to such a degree that I didn't recognise that any of the behaviours that I was displaying were the wrong ones. And we went out for a walk one day, and we walked down a canal. Now, myself and my brother, we talk every single day, but we normally talk via text because we're fellas. You don't have to impart any sort of emotion into a text. Because of the things that we like as well, we normally find ourselves talking about beer, women, football, or music. Now, that day we started off by talking about losing our dad a few years previously. We'd only ever spoken about losing our dad to make funeral arrangements. You know, we were the sort of fellas that the day after my dad's funeral, we were all back at work and cracking on and, you know, doing what we thought fellas should do. We then moved on to start talking about the divorce that he was going through at that particular time. Now, I was trying to support my brother through that divorce. Again, I think in the way that society taught me to, which was, here's a guy with a problem. The way that he solved that is you take him to the pub and pour as much ale down his neck as you possibly can do. From speaking to him that day, I realised that that strategy was no longer the way forward and that talking to him was the best way to deal with it. We then started to talk about, a few years previous to that, myself and my wife had lost a child in pregnancy. Now, that was something I didn't even know how to talk about. So my brother didn't know how to talk to me about it. So we just did what blokes do and pretended that nothing had ever happened. When I got to the end of that walk that day, there was two main feelings that I started to feel. The first one being that I started to feel a weight lift off me, and I started to, you know, acknowledge that, you know, talking's done me some good on this occasion. The other thing that I started to feel was I no longer felt on my own. I think when you're a bloke in these sort of situations, and unfortunately those things coupled with day-to-day life had made my head quite a dark place to be. And as a result, I found myself in a situation where I felt very much on my own, and I thought I was the only guy dealing with these problems, the only guy feeling these ways. And to know that there was somebody else in my family feeling these things was a huge, huge positive for me. Fast forward through another couple of months and I get a phone call off my brother. And by this point, I'd reverted to type and was displaying an awful lot of anger. I'd started to, you know, close up again, not speak about my problems. And as a result, the only outlet that they had was through anger. I think anger as an emotion is one that it's quite socially acceptable for men to show. And that was the trap that I'd fallen into. And, you know, I was becoming the Incredible Hulk every time I got home from work, or, you know, just taking out my anger as the only outlet that I had for these issues that were going on in my head. And I got a phone call off my brother, and he said to me, "You're doing it again." I says, "I'm doing what again?" He says, "You've closed off, you're not talking, you're Mr. Angry, you need to go and talk to somebody." Now, at that time, I tried to front it up, and I said, no, that walk and talk we've had to sort me out. I don't need to speak to anybody, I'm good. I'm very much sort of bought into the idea that, you know, talking can help, but I only need to do it once. You know, I'm a bloke. I don't need to continually talk about these issues and have an outlet. Fast forward later into that week, and at that particular time, I was working as a teacher in a higher educational college. And as irony would have it, I was doing a rugby league session. You know, I've already spoke about Luke being a rugby league player. And we had a young man out on that pitch that day that you would just assume had his life together, in a situation where he always had a girl on his arm. He was always laughing and joking in class, always the, you know, centre of attention, really positive, really funny, really good socially, really good academically. As I say, you would just assume that he had his life together. And one day out on that pitch, he nigh on decapitated this other lad with a head-high tackle. And once this lad was on the floor, massively out of character, man, started to shout a stream of expletives towards him. Now, as I said, that was out of character, and my instinct was to send him from the pitch, and, you know, off you go. That's how you deal with these sort of things in a sporting sort of environment. As I left some of the other members of staff to deal with the young man who was obviously left on the floor, I went over to speak to this other gentleman, and to my surprise, found him sat in floods of tears. Now, as a guy, I'm not used to dealing with other guys that are crying. You know, I've already said that it's not socially acceptable for men to cry. It's socially acceptable for men to be angry. That's something that needs to change. From speaking to him, I managed to sort of 15, 20 minutes down the line, get him to open up to the fact that the night before he'd made an attempt to take his own life. Now, that massively knocked me for six. As I say, it came as such a surprise. It's a, you know, a familiar thing that you hear within issues of suicide, that, you know, it just was so unexpected. He was, you know, such a lovely lad, all the rest of it. And that was exactly the same as within this situation. We managed to get that young man some help, and he's been involved with Andy's Man Club for a period of time. He's recently graduated from university, and he's doing really well for himself. But later that week, that started to resonate within me that this is who I am. I cover up all of my issues and my problems by trying to be funny. I'm massively wearing a mask everywhere I go. I'm trying to cover up for every single problem that I have by pretending it doesn't exist. If I don't go and talk to somebody like my brother suggested, is this a situation I'm going to end up in? Am I basically going to give myself just one option? As I said, unfortunately, my head had become something of a dark place at that time, and those thoughts and feelings had unfortunately been something that had crossed my mind. I decided to walk through the doors of an Andy's Man Club, And it sounds strange now that I represent an Andy's Man Club, an organisation who, our tagline is "It's okay to talk." And my first experience with them, I was determined to not speak. I walked through the door and sort of went, yeah, do you know what? I'll join in with the session. I'll see what it's about, but I'm not going to go too deep into the reasons why I'm here. So the first question came around. The first 3 questions in Andy's Man Club every single week are exactly the same. The first one being, how's your week been? As that question was asked and people started to pass the ball around, I talked out my backside. Said I've had a great week, absolutely fantastic, not a problem. Didn't talk about the phone call I had from my brother. Didn't talk about the situation with the young man from college. Just did what most blokes do. If you turn around to a fella and say, how are you? His instinct is to turn around and go, yeah, fine, pal, how are you? And it becomes more of a greeting than it does a genuine question, I think. And that was exactly as I treated that question that night. Question number 2 came around, and question number 2 is, what's been one positive from your week? Now, I had started to have a conversation with my wife at home about the fact that I was going along to an Andy's Man Club. I'd started to see just how strong my wife had been for me throughout those periods and how difficult I was to live with. As a bit of a side note, I'm of the opinion now that if I hadn't have found Andy's Man Club, that it's likely that my marriage wouldn't have survived. Placing that sort of scenario that I'm already in a dark place, I've got all these things going on in life. Add to that where am I living? I'm not seeing my son every day of my life anymore. What's my financial situation like? You know, God alone only knows where I would be if I hadn't have found Andy's Man Club, and I'm very, very fortunate for having done so. But I was able to talk about that as a positive on that question. Question number 3 then rolled around. Question number 3 for me personally is massive. It's not just the question that unlocked me. It's a question that I've seen unlock hundreds and hundreds of guys around the country every single Monday night in my role traveling as I do with Andy's Man Club. And it's a massively simple one. The question is, have you got anything to get off your chest? Now, as that question was asked, something twigged within me. And an internal voice started to say to me, here's your opportunity. This is what you've come here to do. Take this opportunity, because if you don't, 1, you're going to regret it. And 2, if you don't take this opportunity, when are you going to give yourself another one to do so? If you don't speak today, you'll probably end up carrying all this stuff around with you for the rest of your life. Those points were massively hammered home to me by, first of all, the things that those blokes in that room started to say that night. There were conversations and points that blokes started to speak about in that room that night that I'd never, ever, ever heard guys talk about as long as I live. If I had heard guys talk about those sort of things, they were usually used as a ridicule against them 10 minutes later. It was then hammered home to the point that not one of them was judged. Not one of them was told to man up and get over yourself. Not one of them was laughed at, ridiculed, or judged. You know, they were just offered nothing but support, help, a laugh on occasion. I think that surprises people when we talk about Andy's Man Club, because they think that because of the sort of situations that we're talking about, that it's quite a depressive place to be, and that it's almost like sitting around playing the worst game of top trumps that anybody's ever played in their life. Couldn't be further from the truth. I've never, ever, ever sat in an Andy's Man Club and not laughed, and laughter is an enormous part of that medicine for me. Now, as that ball landed in my hands that night, and I'd seen all of this, it started to show to me that, do you know what, you know, you will get something out of it. And all of this stuff started to fall out of me uncontrollably. There were things that I started to speak about that I talked about with my brother on that canal. There were things that I hadn't spoken about with my brother on that canal that I knew were still bothering me. Things that I'd carried around with me for such a long time that, you know, I started to share that night. There were even things that I started to share that I didn't even know were bothering me anymore. You know, things that I buried so deep inside myself that I didn't even know were issues for myself anymore. Once I passed that ball on that night, the feeling that I got was a euphoric one. An absolutely phenomenal feeling of such a weight being lifted off me, such acceptance, such help, you know, everything else on top of that. We then went on to do question 4 and 5. Question 4 and 5 in Andy's Man Club change every single week, and, you know, can become about setting a particular focus, focusing on different areas of your life. On occasion, they are just there for a laugh and a joke and to send guys out with a smile on their face, and could be something like give us your best impression or tell us your favourite joke, something like that. I've always said that there was 2 people that night. There was the guy that walked into the room and the guy that walked out of the room. And in my opinion, they are 2 different people. Andy's Man Club has completely and utterly changed my life, and I'm very, very fortunate for having found it. Just going to finish off with a really quick video now. Some of the other guys that have walked through the doors of Andy's Man Club and how it's benefited them.
Worries and anxieties, a big part of my life. Started about 10 years ago. I didn't want to live anymore. I thought the world would be better off without me. I thought that maybe if I was to take my own life, I could be with my child. But I was very suicidal at the time.
As a child, it was getting bullied and not being able to say how I felt to people. To talk about the problems I went through as a child and everything that happened. I didn't want to.
My worries and anxieties started around the passing of my father in 2013. It affected me in my day-to-day life, it affected my job, it affected relationships. I didn't talk to my friends and family about the problems that were going on.
So the easiest thing for me was to not be here. It was a Sunday night, I think it was, and I knew I didn't want to be here, and I was planning that night to do something.
Thoughts going through my mind were I would be judged by people, real bad thoughts about, getting out of this life.
My worries and anxieties probably started a long time ago, but the most recent was last year. My cousin committed suicide. It was very hard to discuss my problems at that moment in time, as I couldn't even string a sentence together.
I felt very alone. I had a lot of people around me. I know a lot of people cared, but just something instinctively in me just wouldn't open up.
I never spoke about it with anyone. The problems have kept to me all my life.
There's a stigma attached to around how a man should appear and what he should say. There's an ideal view of a man, and I think people need to break the cycle of that and just not conform to that.
I know a lot of men that have struggled generally, especially in the UK. I think not enough men talk about the problems.
The first step towards helping myself was joining Andy's Man Club.
The only time that I first spoke about my problems was when I first went to Andy's Man Club.
I first sought help through Andy's Man Club.
It's saved my life, really.
My name's Luke Campbell and I'm the founder of Andy's Man Club. I believe male mental health in our country has for a long time now been stigmatised. There's been out 3 stigmas: weakness, burden and embarrassment, and I think that's a lot of the reason why people don't speak. They feel weak to speak, they feel like they'll burden others, and with the lad culture we have with banter, they feel like they're embarrassed to give any vulnerability away. To any man out there watching this, it's not weak to talk, it's not weak to ask for help.
Steps that I've taken to resolve my issues. I've started talking a lot more to people. The importance of talking about how you feel is phenomenal. Talking's really opened me up to people, my family, my friends, to turn my life around. I'm happier than I have been in my entire life.
No matter what, I talk about everything now. I won't keep anything in at all.
If I were going to give any advice, it's talk to whether it be your loved ones, professionals, your friends, and if you don't have any friends, reach out. If you are willing to reach out, people are willing to help.
Getting guys in a room and opening up and giving people hope, giving people a lifeline, that's what Andy's Man Club's all about. My advice to any man out there is that you will get through this. At times you may think that there is no other way out, that relationship breakdown, that debt you're in, or whatever issues you're struggling with, that you can't get through that, but trust me, you can. I've dealt with enough people that know now that cloud will pass. That roller coaster on where it just seems like you're going down, down, down will take a turn and you'll get back up. You just got to look up and know that the brighter time to come in, and I guarantee, reach out, it's okay to talk.
So just really quickly off the back of that video, there's 4 guys in that video that talk about making pretty serious plans to end their own days. All 4 of those guys, from walking through the doors, opening up, acknowledging their own issues, talking, changing their situation, have all gone from a situation of not being able to see a tomorrow for themselves to now being group facilitators for Andy's Man Club somewhere around the country. Again, that just shows the massive power of talking. The fact that those guys couldn't see a tomorrow and now they're offering other people around the country that opportunity for a tomorrow themselves is huge. Spoke previously as well about Luke being a former professional rugby league player. That's what Luke looks like without his Instagram filters, by the way. That's still an arena where toxic masculinity is still quite prevalent. That whole sort of man up culture and don't show any sort of weakness. While that might have a time and a place on a rugby pitch, it doesn't have a time and a place in the rest of the world. For him to be coming from that sort of background and saying to us it's okay to talk is a massive, massive message. We are aware that some of the language that we use as part of our videos is now what we are now know to be dated language around suicide. That whole committed word is not something that's associated with it anymore. We do apologise for it being there. This is knowledge we've given ourselves since the videos were made. We do apologise if it's caused any offence, but I'm sure you'll agree that the message that the videos puts across is such a powerful one. So thanks so much for your attention today, guys. I'm going to come off screen share and take any questions that we might have really quickly if we've got time to do so. But before I do, I'd like to ask something of you, and that would be to talk. Whether or not that's because you're in a situation where you know you need to, whether or not it's because you're in a situation where you know there's somebody in your life that will benefit from knowing that, you know, they have the opportunity to speak, or whether or not it's just talking about what you've heard today in the hope that somebody somewhere will pick up on it. Even if it's sharing one of our social media platforms onto somebody's timeline, even if it's putting a post on your LinkedIn to say Andy's Man Club delivered a talk to us today, check these guys out. If that drops onto the right person's timeline at the right time, the benefit from that can be enormous. So thank you so much. As I say, I will come off screen share now and take any sort of questions anybody might have if we've got opportunity to do so.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks ever so much for your time today. And thank you for having the courage to attend Andy's Man Club yourself and receive that support. Thank you so much. So that was quite difficult for me to hear, and I can imagine it's the same for some of us on this call. Really heartbreaking, devastating. It sent a cold shiver down my spine watching those videos, and it's the worst news that any family member would ever want to receive. I note that the majority of the people on the call today are women, but we've got a really big part to play in this. You know, we can build trust in work areas. We can encourage our family members, our partners, our husbands, our sons to speak to us. And if we build that trust and we notice them small changes, we may notice it before they've even noticed them, the changes in the behaviour themselves. And it's a time to start a conversation. It's a time to ask, how are you? And not just take that first response. Ask again, but how are you really? And listen to what they're actually saying. It's our opportunity to raise that awareness, create a ripple effect. There's no pressure on anybody to talk, just giving them resources and the opportunity to be able to do so. So I'll just hand over now to our wellbeing ambassadors. Is there anybody like to ask any questions? I know we have a couple of comments in the chat, but we can move on to those if.
I think we've got one from Tracy, just asking what would be your advice when someone says they don't need help, but you know that they do. And do you know what? Leanne's just taken my point straight off the bat there that I would always ask twice. You know, as I said before, that question can often become a greeting. And I think that, you know, if you make it known that actually, no, do you know what? I am genuinely asking because I'm concerned for you, or because I know that you need an opportunity to speak, then they might not take that opportunity straight off the bat. They might sort of turn around and go, right, well, you know, I know that I can approach that person if I'm in a situation where, you know, I get 5 minutes and I know that they'll listen. So I would always say ask twice. The amount of guys that come through our door as well with their initial, you know, thought process being, I'll go along to this once and it'll shut her up. She'll, you know, get off my back. I'll go along to her once, tell her that I didn't really like it, and then, you know, it'll shut her up. I know a lot of guys that have come through the door with that sort of outlook on it who are now facilitators, who've come along, ended up seeing that, oh, actually, it's not why I expected this. It does work slightly differently. Right, okay, I will come back next week. So, you know, as awkward as it probably feels, keep bugging, keep, you know, I don't like this word, but keep nagging, keep sort of, you know, letting people know that there are services out there that can benefit them. And, you know, if you don't want to speak to me, go speak to these guys. It's just full of guys that have been in that situation themselves. And, you know, we haven't got an awful lot of leaflets, and, you know, our social media platforms obviously have a lot of testimonials from some of the guys that have attended our sessions and things like that. So that would be my suggestion to you, Tracy. I hope that that's been helpful.
It has, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Keep trying.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a hand up there. Asim, would you like to come on in?
Yeah, so firstly, thank you for the talk. It was absolutely great. I think it addressed so many real issues in such a powerful way. The videos were brilliant as well. I just had a couple of questions. So firstly, like I think for all of us in our individual roles as well, being ambassadors, it's kind of quite similar to how Andy's Man Club may have started off, I guess, in a way. And I think one of the challenges that we might experience is how to keep the conversation going and how to keep the momentum going, and how to stop like the conversation in general on mental health and well-being from fizzling away. So are there any kind of is there any kind of advice that you could give on how Andy's Man Club was able to take on these challenges and overcome them?
Yeah, it was sheer pig-headedness, to be honest with you. It was a determination to make sure that we shouted this loud from the rooftops. We now have an army of guys who, you know, we've got a team now, as you heard Luke say in the video previously, we've got a team of like nearly 300 facilitators who volunteer for us on a weekly basis, who have no issue shouting from the rooftops about, you know, I talked about my mental health and this is the situation that I'm in. I'm now allowing other people to do exactly the same. You can do the same thing. Don't ever feel as though your contribution is less or not enough, or, you know, any sort of contribution to any sort of conversation that can help somebody is always welcome. So yeah, we use a range of different platforms. We obviously have a podcast and YouTube channels and, you know, other social media platforms that we, you know, bang the drum for. You know, we get in touch with CCGs, doctors, surgeries, GPs, A&Es, and basically just say to people, you do know that we're there. You do know that we have this sort of service, and you do know that, you know, these conversations are happening. And like I said, it was just sheer determination, big-headedness, stubbornness, and a determination to see as many people benefit from what it is that Andy's Man Club provides as we possibly could.
Thank you. And sorry, just one more from me. Have you had people come into Andy's Man Club meetings where they have been very kind of close to the point of suicide? And if so, when you are talking to them, like, I understand that for some people, just listening would be exactly what they need. But for people that would need talking out of taking further steps, I guess it's a question of, is reminding them about family and the sort of harm, the pain that they could cause if they go ahead with it. Is guilt tripping a good thing or a bad thing in this case?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily call it guilt tripping. While those reminders can happen on occasion, the way that the questions are structured are there to have these people make these realizations for themselves, and to sort of turn around and, you know, obviously the first three questions, you know, exactly the same every single week. So guys know when they've got that opportunity to share or to vent or to focus on a positive. Beyond that, I think one of our questions last night was something like, when was the last time you put 100% into something? And, you know, what was it and why did you put that 100% into it? That sort of question is there to make guys think that, oh, well, actually, maybe I've not put that level of effort in that I can do, or, you know, what benefit did I have when I did put that level of effort into something in my life, and I can do that again because I've already achieved that once. So, you know, we wouldn't necessarily guilt trip people into it. There will be reminders of the fact that, you know, there are people around you in your life that care. You know, as I've already spoken about, you know, the situation with Alfie, you know, we want less and less guys to be feeling like Alfie was feeling. So we want less and less guys the way that Andy was feeling. There will be reminders of that type, but it's not necessarily guilt tripping. And like I say, the way that the questions are structured, it's there for these guys to make those realizations for themselves. If we do get somebody presenting at the session that talks of harming themselves immediately, then obviously we would escalate that. We have a duty of care. That's the only time we would ever break confidentiality within a session, is to involve 999 and to get those sort of services involved to help somebody initially at that point of need. So, you know, we do have escalating strategies. We also have, even though we're a peer-to-peer support group and we can't make official referrals, we can signpost as well, and we can sort of say to guys that, you know, what normally happens is that there'll be somebody in that room that's had a shared experience, and they'll turn around and say, well, do you know what? When I was in that situation, I tried this, and, you know, come and find me afterwards and I can maybe help you out with finding that contact or whatever it might be. So, you know, it's mutually supportive in that sense as well.
That's great. Thank you.
No problem at all.
Thank you. Debbie?
Yeah, I was just wondering if there is a high uptake of black boys, because I know in the community there's been a high percentage of black boys in our community committing suicide. And it is worrying because, like I say, boys don't tend, or young men don't tend to want to talk, and there's the stigma attached to it. And, you know, it'd be very useful because I know quite a few black boys that could do with a bit of support and help. And sometimes it's all the culture around it as well that makes them not want to go. They might have a bit of like altercation with somebody else and gangs and things like that, so they might not want to go in case somebody sort of goes there and speaks and sees them there and targets them, type of thing. So how do you go about things like that?
We've done an awful lot of work within the sort of BAME networks to try and help people from a different multicultural background attend Andy's Man Club. We do have a very culturally diverse amount of groups, and we have more and more people from those sort of backgrounds attending the sessions. Some of the issues that we have in regard to getting those guys to actually open up and maybe help other people that were in the same sort of situation as themselves, as you sort of described there, are quite common. And while they're quite happy to attend the sessions, they're not that happy to start speaking about it because they feel they might be judged. As you say, there are probably cultural issues within the areas that they live in. There probably are issues that, you know, they don't want everybody else to know that they're going along to something like Andy's Man Club. So we do have an awful lot more people from a culturally diverse background attending the sessions, but there isn't so many of them that want to speak about the fact that they're going along. So it's something that we're doing an awful lot of work with a lot of, as I say, BAME organisations, BAME networks, and different people like that. LGBTQ communities as well. We're obviously trying to encourage any sort of men in those sort of environments as well to come along to sessions, because, as you say, those stigmas are they're not just ingrained in the way that, you know, everybody else feels them. They are, you know, a way of life, and they are 100% hammered home. For example, I know of a guy. I used to facilitate the session in Oldham, and we had a young man attend one evening, and he told his family he was attending mosque, and he'd come along to Andy's Man Club because he knew that the only way that his family would let him out of the house was to say that he was going and you know, practicing his religion. Because if he was to tell his family, I'm going along to Andy's Man Club, I'm really struggling, the judgment that he would receive would make his situation an awful lot harder. So we do have an awful lot more of those sort of situations happening at the moment as well.
Right, okay. Thanks for that. I know because there's people in the community, well, young boy in the community that mentioned meeting up at they like to go to spa and things like that, is to go to a spa once a week and stuff like that. If they're not going to go to play, just for them to meet up and talk and discuss, because I think once you kind of branch out into adult life, they kind of, a lot of them go into the different areas that like, I don't know, sound system days, men used to always meet up and have sound systems and play music together. All that's kind of gone. Everybody's grown up, had separate lives. It's actually bringing them back in together. So a lot of them may have relationship problems and things like that we want to speak about, and they just don't have that place to actually go back to at that outlet. So I think that's huge problems.
Yeah, like I say, those sort of opportunities do happen as well. We had people who were present at, obviously it's not happened for a couple of years, but the last carnival that happened in Huddersfield, we had a presence of Andy's Man Club there. We've had, you know, opportunities where we do try and get out and spread the sort of word that Andy's Man Club are around. But there's one guy that you attended one of our sessions, I think it was over Manchester way, and he was hosting, you know, I forget what it was. It was a specific sort of genre of music night, and it was really sort of West Indian and, you know, a sort of Jamaican. You know, there was jerk chicken and everything flying around, and all of those guys from the session went along and just integrated within that community and showed the, you know, everybody else that actually, do you know what, these guys, not only do they sit and talk about their issues on a Monday night, but they also support each other through other areas of life as well throughout, you know, the rest of the week. So those sort of things do happen quite organically.
Something like that would probably bring them out, and but in like it depends on the outlet, because obviously there's a lot of things sometimes going into public open spaces and certain things firing off, and you know, it's life, it's reality, and I deal with reality.
So anything else that we can do to help within those sort of communities, don't hesitate to get in touch with me. I'll put my email address in the comment box in a moment, so that obviously anybody that does want any help within specific areas of their community, if they want to get in touch with me, then feel free to do so.
Brilliant, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. That's been really helpful. I noticed Leanne has put in the comments box for some promotional leaflets. I do have some in the office, Leanne, so I can send some of those down to you. And Amber's
feel free to drop
asking
me
if
an
there's-
email and I'll get you as many of those out as well, Leanne. No problem at all. We'll get some in the post to you. Sorry to interrupt, Sam.
Yeah, you've got some beer mats as well, I noticed as well. So
We've got beer mats. We've now got business cards. I'll show you these quickly. We've now got business cards because we think that they're a little bit easy for guys to pick up rather than a leaflet. They can literally just pick one of those up, slip it in the pocket. You know, those sort of stigmas that are existing, they're not going to be judged by somebody seeing them pick up a leaflet and things like that. So we've got those as well now. So, you know, we try to branch out into all sorts of different parts of awareness raising materials. So.
Yeah, brilliant. And then Amber's just asking, do the virtual sessions take place every Monday at 7? And are they local sessions or wide ranging?
We try to regionalise them as much as we possibly can, so that if a guy does then take that step through the doors of a club, he might see a familiar face. So we do try to regionalise them. That isn't always possible. You know, so I know that we had a guy from Dorset end up in our Scotland club last week, which, you know, couldn't be further away from each other, I think, if they tried. But yeah, we do try to regionalise them as much as possible. But as I say, it's not always that possible. Sometimes it depends. If a guy messages us really, really late, he'll go into the session that's got space in it. If he sends us a message nice and early, we'll ask him where he's based. We'll try and regionalise the session as much as we possibly can do. So.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's been brilliant, Andrew. Thanks ever so much.
My pleasure. Thank you
so just
so
to
much.
reiterate, it is okay not to be okay. If you are struggling or you know somebody who is, please do reach out. Do get that support. It is okay to talk, as we've heard here today. And just please continue to spread that message and keep up the absolutely fantastic work that you and the guys are doing.
Thank you so much. As I say, guys, my email address is in the comment box. Feel free to contact me for anything at all. If I can be of any help, feel free to get in touch. Thanks so much, guys.
Okay, thanks ever so
Thank
much.
you.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye bye.